Hey guys, welcome to Punky's World. We are doing a genealogy video. Before we get there though, I wanted to show you my haul from the used bookstore once I turned that book in, which I got $5.25 for it. So, the whole story of Arlington National Cemetery, Maine history. And once again, the name on the back of it came from the Maine Historical Society. Which is where the Maine Memory Network is. Awesome. And once again, I went to a Farrington. Probably the same Farrington family. Recipes, gotta have a cookbook. And just some quick, easy knowledge. There's interesting facts in there. Anyway, the Maine history one goes over there. Obviously. Oh man. I'm so excited. Anyway. Yeah, this is permanently printed on here. Let me cross off his address. See? David Farrington. Probably a relative of mine. And I got this on the way by. Okay. So obviously this goes with my heritage stuff over there. And I am going to go back to the Maine Memory Network and look more closely. Now that I know it's the Maine Historical Society, I might even give them a call. So, getting into the genealogy portion of the program, which, like I said, that book is, I went through the magazine, and there were actually a lot of helpful tips this month. And I'm thinking about doing a monthly thing, Family Tree Magazine tips. I took out these 2 pages, because I don't want to keep every issue. I'll have a hoard. This is the Germanic alphabet. How they write their letters. Which is all the way up to the all the way from A to Z. So that could be helpful. I mean, I do have a lot of German relatives. And this are the most common U.S. middle names. Let me turn on the light because things just got dark. Excuse me. I'm also going to turn on the air. Because it's actually quite hot out. Sorry. Okay, now we return to our regularly scheduled programming. The most common U.S. middle names. Then I'll tell you some facts about middle names that I learned. In the 1910s, boys were Joseph, William, Edward, John, Henry, James, Lee, really, Charles, Francis, and George. Girls in that same time period were May, M-A-E, Marie, Elizabeth, Louise, Mary, Anne, May, M-A-Y, Lee, also L-E-E, Jane, and Irene. The source was moose roots, but they no longer exist. I believe that was a Maine site. In the 1960s, for boys, Lee, Allen, A-L-L-E-N, Edward, Anthony, Michael, James, Wayne, Joseph, Allen, A-L-A-N, and Scott. And for girls, Anne, A-N-N, Marie, Lynn, L-Y-N-N, Lee, L-E-E, Jean, Sue, K, Louise, Renee, R-E-N-E-E, Elizabeth. In the 2010s, for boys, James, Lee, Michael, Joseph, Alexander, David, William, Andrew, Matthew, and Robert. Not much has changed. Girls, Marie, Grace, Rose, Anne, Elizabeth, Faith, May, M-A-E, Lynn, L-Y-N-N, Renee, R-E-N-E-E, and Jane. So not much has changed in that regard. The one thing I want to talk to you about in regards to middle names is that middle names, well, first of all, they're an important clue because they help you to differentiate different generations that have the same names. I know in my Irish family, because of Irish naming patterns, I have like 6 generations of John Wilson. That name is ridiculously common. So I have to go back to like original John and Sarah. I don't think he had a middle name. He did, I'm not aware of it. And then I go to his son, which is John Roy, and his son, which is John Charles. And actually that John's grandfather was also the first John and Sarah John. His grandfather was also John. So you had John, James, John. So it was like, yeah, you know? So we usually either said, oh, I'm talking about John Charles or John Roy, or we'll say John and Sarah John and Lena John, however we need to do it, you know? Or John Charles would be John and I can't remember her first name. Her last name resembled her, but anyway. And sometimes a double first name can appear to be a middle name. Sometimes a girl's name will be hyphenated, June Marie or something. That's a bad example, but you know what I mean. Sarah Jane. It might be hyphenated. Or it might be spelled all together. And they don't have a middle name per se. My friend Betty Jo. Her name is Betty Jo. There is no middle name. Jo is not her middle name. Her name is not Betty. It's Betty Jo. Even though there's a space. That's the kind of thing that also middle names, particularly for male children, can represent a maiden name of a mother or grandmother, something like that. For example, the president's middle name is his grandmother's maiden name. Same thing with my cousin David. I have several. My uncle's first cousin, my father's first cousin, David. So my uncle is David Wilson, and he's David Wilson. My uncle is David Thomas, after their grandfather. His cousin is David Burgess, which would be their grandmother's maiden name. Excuse me. You'll also find, and I've talked about this, that depending on the culture, some people use their middle name instead of their first name. The French ladies seem to do it, the Irish ladies do it, so that can be confusing when looking on a census. Unless, of course, you've always known them by that name, like for example, Delia, Dick and Delia. Now, obviously, Dick is Richard. You know, that's common sense. You know that. But you mean anybody. But we didn't know until we were standing in front of their gravestone, because we had gone up to visit their gravestone because it's right up the street. And I looked at it and I looked at my dad and I said, Dad, Aunt Delia's name was Ida? He said, it was? Because she'd always been Aunt Delia, which was her middle name. And on the census, she would come up as Delia. So, same thing with her brother, my grandmother's brother. His name was David Albert Phileas Hemingway. I know, that's a mouthful, isn't it? I'm not sure where Albert came from, but David was his father's name, so they called him Albert, which was his middle name. Phileas was his uncle's name, Uncle Phil. And I am guessing that his Uncle Phil and Aunt Delia were probably his godparents, and that's why Phileas was a part of his name. I don't have the, what do you call it, baptism to prove it, but I'd be willing to bet. There was also something that they didn't discuss that I know of in my own family, and that's unofficial middle names. Now, what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that a middle name is given later and not at the time of birth, as an honorarium to someone. For example, my Grandpa Schmidt never had a middle name. He was born during a time period in America where they weren't very common. And and maybe Germans didn't really give them, because not all cultures did. So when he was a little boy, he used to help out a gentleman. And it was asked of his family, because he was such a lovely and helpful young man. I know he doesn't have a middle name. Can he have, the man's middle name that he helped out so much? I forget exactly how it went. Maybe they didn't ask. Maybe they gave it to him because he had helped the man out so much, and they wanted to honor the man because the man was so kind to him. So they unofficially gave him that man's name as a middle name. And he became John Merle. And as a result, my uncle became Merle. So that man's name lived on. Only my uncle was Merle Eugene, after my grandmother's grandmother. And that's another thing you can see in middle names. He's a grandfather's name. For example, Merle Eugene. Dale. You'll hear me call him Uncle Dale, because that's who he is. But his name is John Dale. And his siblings either called him Day Day when he was little, or Dale, because Murphy was John. So actually, my grandmother called my grandfather Johnny. Actually, a lot of people called him Johnny. They didn't call him John. He was Johnny. So that's what I know about middle names. I added my own extra stuff, like you'll see a special male in their life as a middle name, or female in their life as a middle name, as well as the other tips that they gave. I also gave the tip about the honorary middle names that were never on the birth certificate, but became a middle name later in honor of someone. So, now, another topic. Oh, hold that thought. Change your battery. Okay, the battery's changed. While on the subject of middle names and culture, the next part of this discussion is going to be on waves of immigration. Now, there were 4 waves. 1607 to 1830. It's mostly English, obviously. From 1830 to 1880, saw a different wave. Let me grab, here it is. Oops. Grab this, and I will find the waves of immigration so I can tell you. Page 50. Okay. Okay, here we go. In the first wave, obviously, it was basically English, Scotland, Scots-Irish from Northern Ireland, Germany, and the Netherlands. In the second wave, from 1830 to 1880, Ireland, Germany, well, German states, Germany, and Scandinavia. Which is, the second wave is when my great-great and great-grandparents came in. The third wave, from 1881 to 1924, were Eastern Europe, including Jewish communities, Slavic countries, Russia, Austria-Hungary, and its successor states, and Italy. The fourth wave, from 1965 to present, all over the world, especially Latin America and Asia. Now, what I'd like to do is go over some of the record sites. No, I'll do that last. Let me go over some ancestry tips. Some things that I felt were, these are the 6 tips that they gave, and I felt that they were important to share using any website. Don't sync blindly. What I mean is, don't just, oh, this person's got a lot of information about, great-great Uncle Harry. I think I'll add from their tree to my tree, and they have 0 sources in the middle, 0 actual records. Don't do that. Because chances are, their work on great-great Uncle Harry is guesswork. I mean, you can write to them and say, do you have records? Because I have records that are not on there because they're actual physical records. So, that could be the case. But don't just sync things to your tree blindly. And use legal names when you're writing a tree. For example, my father was known as Willie to everybody. And my grandfather was known as Bob. proper way to write them into the tree are Robert Wilson Sr. and Robert Wilson Jr. You can put under, also known as, or however your particular software does it, alternate name, there's different ways. Willie, Bob, Willie for Dad, Bob for Grandpa, whatever the case may be. List women by their maiden name. That is one of my biggest pet peeves when I'm looking at other people's trees and deciding whose trees that I want to sync from, is, for gosh sakes, women are listed under their maiden names, and so many people write them in either with their maiden and their married name, or just their married name. It's like, if you don't know their maiden name, leave it blank. Don't put their married name, because that's incorrect. And it messes with the tree, because then the tree expects the parents to be, it's not good. And always list relationships accurately. What that means is, for example, I have so many examples of all this stuff because I've been through it. I've been doing it for the better part, over 2 decades. I was going to say the better part of it. Over 2 decades, almost 3. And I've learned a few things. You need to be able to, a lot of early software didn't allow you to list the relationships accurately. In other words, my grandmother, okay, she had a daughter she put up for adoption. She was never married to the father, but there has to be a way to put the father in. She had my mother outside of wedlock. Had to be a way to put my grandfather in and add a relationship that doesn't make him appear to be a spouse. And I got some Cox pics last night, so I'm going to go over there and save them. So you need to go in, and on Ancestry you can go in and change the relationship between, say, my grandmother and my mother's father. He was a partner or a boyfriend. He wasn't a husband. It still doesn't show up on the outside. It still looks like a spouse. And cite your sources. Especially if you got the record of Ancestry, tell it to put it in the list so that I can click on that and see, oh, okay. And also, don't take Ancestry's word for, we think we've found the mother and father of so-and-so, because it's not necessarily accurate. When I add those, I usually look and see how many sources are cited. If there are 3 or 4 sources cited that are all saying it, that are actual vital records, I'll add them as this person's parents, because clearly they are this person's parents. If there aren't any, or are there one, I'm not going to add it, because I'm not going to trust it. Another pet peeve of mine is the way people write dates. For the most part, Ancestry fixes it, but not always. The proper way to write a date in genealogy is the English way. They do it in Canada too, which used to confuse me when I was a kid, but it doesn't anymore. For example, 8 August 1919, okay? That is how you write it. Day, month, year. That is the English way of doing it. I believe they do it that way in Canada as well. So if you see 8, well, let's take 11 August 1919. If you see 11/8/19, it is not November 8th, 1919. It's the 11th of August, 1919. You have to remind yourself of that when you're watching English stuff because of the reversal of it. of the way that we do it in standard everyday writing. But in genealogy, it is done the English way. Like I said, I'm pretty sure Canadians do it the same way. Okay. Now, nope. I have 4 census tips for you. Then I'm going to talk about some websites that I found that might be helpful to us as genealogists. By the way, the Canadian census for, what year was that? Excuse me. For 1931 came out on June 1st of this year, became public at the National Genealogic Society in Canada, and you can look at it for free. Because remember, Canada and the UK did their census on the 1 years, and we did ours on the 0 years. That means we did a 1900, they did a 1901. We did a 1910, they did a 1911, and so on and so forth. Now, 4 little census tricks. Relatives can be recorded as borders or roomers. And one thing that they didn't say is relatives can also be recorded as, because I've seen it in my own family, a known relative, a niece, was recorded as a servant. And I've seen many nieces and nephews recorded as boarders. So, and I knew this because the mother told me this. Divorced women were often enumerated or recorded as widows. So it'll say they're widowed, and then you'll find their spouse somewhere else on the census, or former spouse, and you'll go, oh God, he died. It was a way of making them look better, because being a divorcee was looked badly upon, back in the early days. 3, don't assume the wife is the mom to all the kids that you see on the census. Look at how long the parents were married, and also go back another census and see if dad was married to someone else who died. Something like that. Find a marriage record. There are other ways to prove who's the mom of who. My mother had a big fight about that, because people had this woman listed as the mother of this child, and she was the mother to all the other children, not this child, because she was already dead. So, my mother had big arguments about that, but she proved it. Remember, in the census, people are going to use their nicknames. They're going to use maybe their middle names if they went by their middle names. My great-great-aunt, Mary Louise, would use Louise in the census. Sometimes, and sometimes she would use Mary. But you have to be careful with that. Or they might use initials. Or, like I said, nicknames. Now, my father's nickname, like I said, was Willie. But if my father was taking a census, he was smart enough to say my name is Robert Wilson. Not everybody thought about that back in the day. He understood something that back in the day nobody would have thought of, and that's that this is a formal record in a way. It's a government record. So if something is a formal record, or if you're talking to a professional on the phone, you don't say, hi, I'm Willie. You say Robert Wilson or Bob Wilson. You know what I mean? So, in that way, I always knew my dad's name because generally, until he got to know you, he introduced himself as Bob. I'm always introduced him as Roy. But, and some people use initials, you know? So, in looking at census, those are ways your ancestors can hide from you without even trying. Okay, now, let's go to the last segment here, which is the websites. Again, the National Genealogical Society of Canada. There is one called Reimagine, which cleans up pictures. That's an app. Family Search Historical Images. Also, English and Welsh records are online now. I guess they cost a lot less to purchase them from a website than they would cost to purchase them from the place. They're a couple pounds a piece. I don't know what that translates to at this particular moment in time, but you have to buy the record to see it. I hate that. Let me see that it's the correct record. Even if you don't show me everything, the Threads app, that's another, it's like Twitter, but it's owned by Facebook and Instagram, and there's a lot of genealogy on it. In fact, Family Tree is a part of it. Also under Family Search, there's Historical Images. Family Search is a free site, of course. And they'll find pics of where your ancestors came from and pics during the period that your ancestors lived there through your search. Now, there's one called lifetimememoirs.com that / family tree that will literally write your autobiography for you. I don't know how much it is, I haven't looked into it, but it puts your genealogy in a nice bound book. And there's one called vividpics.com that helps you restore your old pictures. Now, we all have the problem of not enough space to store everything. So there are a group of clouds that a list of cloud storage options that they give, and I just wanted to give them to you so you can research them for yourself and find your best fit. Maybe Google Drive is your best fit. I personally like that, but there's Backblaze, B-L-A-Z-E, Carbonite, which I've heard of, iDrive, and LiveDrive. These are the four that they had in the in the magazine, and look them up, see what's the least expensive, see who gives the most bytes for free, stuff like that. No, I'll put some links, not those, but like the family tree images and stuff in the description of this video. Holy crap, this has been a long video, but that's okay. I don't have anything better to do today, because I'm taking a break today. I have had 4 intense days of work. So that would be good. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would like this to become a monthly thing. Tips from Family Tree Magazine, monthly. Or, well, not really monthly because they do it every couple of months. Excuse me. Because they don't come out every month, but a regular thing on the channel. In the genealogy playlist. Excuse me. To stand off this video, something really strange happened. If you'll recall, I found a blanket, a Christmassy blanket, and I washed it, dried it, and now it's gone. Cannot find it anywhere. It's really strange. So, anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless you. Please subscribe to both channels. I will see you tomorrow. Please stay safe. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys. God bless you.